Morning, you lot. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. Bugsy Malone is just over here, thinking about digging a hole, doing the things she loves. I hope if you are doing the things that you love, that they don't get you in any holes that you can't dig yourself out of. In any event, guys, I hope you are all happy and healthy at least. Please do me some favours, guys, on today's video. Hit the like button for me, if you don't mind. If you enjoy the content, it really helps the channel out. Hit the subscribe button as well whilst you're at it, if you haven't already. And even if you have, double check you still are. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. Before we get into it, let me apologise in advance. I've lost my wind pop filter microphone. Can't find it anywhere, so I'm sure there will be some crackling on the video today. I do apologise. I've ordered a replacement and it hasn't arrived yet. Guys, no transfer news, views and clues that I can tell this morning, but there is something else to talk about, and it is quite interesting. It's quite interesting, and that is Football Insider, the outlet with more exclusives than Bugsy Malone's OnlyFans account, has suggested that Tottenham are in talks with Danish football professional outlet Nordsjaelland of signing up and joining into a feeder club relationship. Nordsjaelland is responsible for of recent names. So they've got this guy called Schelderup, who I believe has already signed for, I think it's Barcelona or Real Madrid, one of those two monsters in Spain, but is back on loan playing for Nordsjaelland. Of late, they've also been responsible for their youth academy, developing and delivering potential future superstars of the world football, such as a channel favourite here, Andreas Skov Olsen, who currently plies his trade over in Belgium, for Bruges. Also responsible for discovering Mohamed Kudus, the West Ham sensation, who played at Ajax last season. A few others as well. They've got a very good, very strong academy up there in Northern Europe, and any relationship with Tottenham Hotspur will be something that's very interesting, especially, well, at least of all to me. As you know, I'm a massive fan of the multi-club ownership model, and the feeder club relationship is slightly different, but it ultimately provides a lot of the same beneficiaries. And I've been saying this for a long time on the channel, that I do believe Scott Munn's ultimate responsibility here, he might be doing other things in the meantime, but I do believe that his long-term, suggested proposal would be to help the people, the powers that be at ENIC, to get back into bed into the multi-club ownership model. Don't forget that Daniel Levy and ENIC, back in the day, back in the 90s, were one of the first football ownership models to make a move into multi-club ownership. When they bought Tottenham, they already had stakes in Slavia Prague, in Rangers, in Basel, in AEK Athens, and one or two others. Then the rules around multi-club ownership in UEFA, at least, changed, and they had to divest their interest in all but one club, which happened to be Tottenham Hotspur, as a consequence of two of the clubs that were owned by ENIC meeting in European football in the old Europa League, the old version of the Europa League. And so they have history, they have a relative experience in that space, and obviously the rules of the game, the line crossed them, they didn't cross the line. But since that has happened, the rules around multi-club ownership have loosened almost to the point where they don't really exist anymore, and even the rules that are still in place are so vague and clearly broken at every sort of nook and cranny that you look at or look within in European football, that they are essentially non-existent. And Seferin, the current UEFA Cup president, or the UEFA president, has intimated on Gary Neville's podcast last year that the rules will be loosened further to support ownership from places like sovereign wealth funds like Saudi Arabia, etc. So, a lot of the multi-club ownership growth over the last sort of 5 years has been as a consequence of the loosening of the rules. But I think it's something stupid now, like 1 in every 3 clubs around Europe are part of some sort of multi-club ownership model, which is absolutely mind-boggling when you think of it. I haven't got the statistic in front of me, so don't quote me on that. I am going to do a video, maybe a 2 or 3 part video on the history of multi-club ownerships, the current present state, how it would suit Tottenham if we were to go down that path. I do believe, however, that, as I say, that Scott Munn is ultimately here in order to embark on that at some stage into the future. And so it's of no surprise to me to hear a story from Football Insider that links Tottenham to a club in Denmark with at least some connection to that model, that thesis, even though a feeder club relationship isn't quite the same. In a nutshell, the feeder club relationship is that the 2 clubs remain independent, but yet there is whether a verbal agreement or some sort of contractual agreement to allow youth team players from both sides to kind of move interchangeably and to play for the youth teams of the opposite team, in order for both teams to run an eye over the talents, I guess, of each person's pool. Obviously, the feeder club parent, in this case it would be Tottenham Hotspur, would be the main beneficiary of taking the hottest young talent and giving them the chance to play at the higher level of youth team football before they're necessarily ready. There'll also be able to be loan deals that can move back and forth to give certain players certain minutes in certain strengths of leagues. And, other than that, there will be sort of shared learning, shared training sessions, training methods, shared scouting principles. You could even argue that there could be, if there was a future relationship that was going to strengthen into something more formalised, then you could also have the conversation around whether or not the 2 teams could try to play the same style of football in an effort to try to allow for the talents that are emerging at one to be able to eventually be more of a better fit for the team at the top end of the scale, should they be good enough. And so it does, for all intents and purposes, appear like a multi-club ownership model. However, some of the drawbacks of multi-club ownership model is often around branding, often around kind of ownership and identity. There's teams, for example, like I think it's Lorient in France, whose hardcore fans, their ultras, almost tore the place down when they heard that they might become a feeder club in a multi-club ownership model to Bournemouth under Bill Foley's reign, to the point where they had to pull out of the deal altogether, because ultimately it doesn't matter where you are in the world and what level of caliber the team that is part of that model is. The fans that support that team are obviously super passionate about their beloved club, and so don't necessarily like, or wouldn't necessarily be on board, this model of playing second fiddle in a pyramid to some other team in some other country that they don't see the benefits from. So you have to be very careful, and there's lots of other pros and cons. You can do shared back office operation costs. There's having roots in a certain country so that you can place your scouting operations in that area as well. There's a whole bunch of pros, a whole bunch of cons for the multi-club ownership model, and oftentimes the first step into that direction with certain clubs is a feeder club relationship that is informal, but ultimately it gives the people within that relationship first dibs, first dabs, if you like, first look on certain players that may emerge in either format, in either side. Maybe there'll be players, if this was to be formalised or to become a thing with Nordsjaelland, there might be situations where a lot of Tottenham's younger players who are not quite ready yet, but maybe ready in the future, they get to go over to Northern Europe, to Scandinavia, to develop their to develop their game, to be able to get some sort of level of competitive minutes, and it can bridge the gap between going to a going from the under 21 level of football where they can excel to the professional level where they might not necessarily have made that sort of leap forward yet, without having to be loaned out to teams that don't have any official relationship with the host club, with the parent club. And of course the rules around multi-club ownership in country specific terms are a little bit different to the idea around whether or not certain clubs can have relationships outside of the leagues in which they operate. Tottenham couldn't have a multi-club ownership model that included another team in the Premier League, for example, or even in the Championship. In a situation where that team got promoted, there will be conflicts of interest, and so that isn't allowed to happen. When you look at Manchester City, who is the greatest example, the City Football Group, of a multi-club ownership model, I think they now have 14 or 15 different teams dotted around the world, and the benefits have far exceeded any of the costs or the risks in that relationship, in that structure. And Tottenham will have to kind of go through the earliest processes of doing that, should that be the ultimate goal of what Scott Munn is here to do. And I think that maybe, just maybe, something like a feeder club relationship that is informalised in at least the first instance is a way to kind of break ground on that process. And again, there is lots of benefits to both teams, lots of shared learnings, and ultimately what Tottenham could also do is offer investment into that company. Now, I'm not familiar too much with Nordsjaelland's situation, whether they're financially stable, whether they are close to insolvency. I don't know. All I can tell you about them is that they have a very good relationship with developing youth in and around that area, and they have got some inroads, some relationships into places like Ghana. I think there's something called the Dare to Dream Academy or something like that in Africa that Nordsjaelland set up, and that's where Mohamed Kudus came from, and also one or two others. I think there's another player called Ibrahim who currently plays at Nordsjaelland and is currently linked to go to West Ham United as a winger/forward. I think there's another player called Suleimani who came through that Ghana connection to Nordsjaelland and is now applying their trade at a higher level in Europe as well. So, but Nordsjaelland have got a lot of value to offer in terms of whether they be the right connection for Tottenham, and maybe this would be, as I say, the first step, the first kind of inroads into what could be a more longer-term relationship that becomes part of a multi-club ownership model. To me, I think it's necessary to go down that path. The benefits, especially in a world where the FFP rules and profit and sustainability rules are going to continue to tighten. We'll see if that is the case. Obviously, right now, there's a lot of calls from certain people to loosen the rules around PSR and FFP because of the dry window that we've just seen. However, in an effort to try to, well, if you do believe that the rules will at least maintain at the same level, then one or several of the benefits that come from those sorts of relationships are that you can indeed have, less wastage, less slippage in your costs, and also, as I say, you can bulk up your back office operation costs if you were to make that move more formalised. Now, to Tottenham fans who are looking for every penny available to be placed into Tottenham squad, maybe another project around divesting some of that money that we do have, that the club generates, into new things like new ownership of new facilities or helping other teams out in other countries through their own processes may not be palatable. To me, I think as I say, if you can get through the first stages of a multi-club ownership and you can make the first one a success and then you go to the third, fourth and fifth, generally speaking, and again, I'm going to do a video on this that explains this in more detail, how many clubs it takes on average for it to become a worthwhile venture. Usually speaking, the failures happen at the first additional club junction. If you can get past that and get to a third, fourth and fifth club, then ultimately the pros outweigh the cons and they magnify and amplify quite seriously, to the point where Manchester City obviously reaped the benefits. Yesterday, I think they've just agreed a deal with for the best player. I forget his name. Is it Vinicius, who plays for Genoa in Spain? And that Genoa were going on to a potential title challenge. So it will be interesting to see what happens if they qualify for the Champions League next year. It will be interesting to see what happens with regards the rules. I mean, obviously Leipzig and Salzburg have to fight that kind of argument every single year with UEFA, but they have made the case that there is Chinese walls and that there is no conflict of interest or overlap in the ability for those two to work independently and yet compete for the same honours. Even though in reality, every time you look at Salzburg and Leipzig, there is more than enough suspicion to think that there is a conflict of interest. I think there was a player, was it Benjamin Sesko, who left Salzburg and went to Leipzig for about 25 million euros, despite Manchester United bidding 50 million euros in the same season, in the same summer, for the same player. So I think the argument that there's no conflict of interest is a little bit of a silly one. However, they seem to get away with it. Manchester City have teams placed in every corner of the world, and so when new talents emerge, whether through their own academies in those clubs or elsewhere, they'll be the first ones to be made aware of them. So hopefully Tottenham can get on board that situation, guys, and this Nordsjaelland link is an interesting one. The Football Insider, for what it's worth, have lost all credibility in my mind. The amount of exclusives they put out that never come true is shockingly high for a club for an outlet that tries to be sincere with its journalistic integrity. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? But I thought I'd bring it to you. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Nordsjaelland, is there any interest there? Do you want Tottenham to go down that path and try to get into something in the future that looks like a City football group? even if it means that not every penny of Tottenham's available funding can go into Tottenham right now, would you be okay with some sort of divestiture of our funds into supporting other teams if it meant that we had first dibs on the next talents that those clubs identified and trained up? Let me know your thoughts, guys. That's about it for the Tottenham news, views and clues. But like I say, I've been promising you this for months. I am going to do a massive deep dive into the history of multi-club ownership because it's a fascinating topic to me. Maybe, just maybe, this one is all pie in the sky stuff, but maybe it's not. Let me know your thoughts. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, guys, bye-bye!